Well, good evening. Thanks everybody for coming in and sitting down there. I'm Ed Noy. Glad you're all here tonight. Wish it was a bigger crowd, but we got what we've got. We've got a bunch of our board members here. These are the folks that helped me run this organization. Let's see who we have. Well, we got Matt LeBeau, who runs our programs committee. We got Mike Johnson over here, who runs our special interest groups. We've got Bob who helps out a lot on fall seminar along with Paul. There he is behind there. Right in front of Paul is Ron Austin. Ron is the chief guru for the Woodworkers Expo. And who else? Oh, yeah, Angela, she is. Angela takes care of our membership stuff and does 100 other things that are very, very helpful and important. Please, everybody, do the same thing I'm doing. Turn your cell phones on mute so we don't have some interruptions here tonight. Well, for those of you who aren't regulars with us, we do 10 meetings, monthly meetings a year. Twice a year or 2 times a year, we substitute our monthly meeting with the Northern Woods exhibition, which we had 3 weeks ago, and then our fall seminar and the Woodworkers Expo. So I guess we're down to 9 meetings a year. And most of them we like to have live like this, but when the weather gets really bad, we do Zoom meetings and stream them, and so everybody can stay home where it's warm and safe. One of the real big benefits and the thing that brings most members or people in as members, and we've got more than 800 of them, is the discounts that our supporters offer our members. You take your membership card and go to places like Forest Products up in Maplewood or Rockler or Woodcraft or Cywick Lumber or a bunch of other wholesale lumber dealers, and they give you discounts, some as high as wholesale. So a lot of people enjoy that. So we ask that you support those folks and buy your materials and lumber there. So the 3 big events we've got the Northern Woods, which is always the last weekend in April. We had a really great show this year, and you're going to see part of that here if you weren't able to get down to Eden Prairie Center at the end of the month, last month, and see it live. And then our next event coming up would be the Expo. Ron, you want to say a few words?
Yeah, the Expo is October 12th. It's at the fairgrounds. We're going through our list of vendors and potential participants. It's about 230. If you know of somebody that we should add to that list, please let us know. We're hoping we can get maybe a third of those to show up to the show. But none of us have done this professionally, so we're open to suggestions. So, but again, if you know somebody that should be presenting at the expo, have a table, please let us know. We also have cards if anyone's interested. Thanks.
Thanks, Ron. Yeah, it's a great way to get engaged with the guild. If you want to be part of that operation, talk to Ron. I'm sure he can find something for you to do. And then coming up the first week in November will be our annual fall seminar. Paul, you want to speak to that a little bit?
So the fall seminar this year will be November 1st through 3rd. We'll be back again at St. Paul College. Our presenter this year is Chris Martin. Chris just retired from Iowa State. He was part of the School of Fine Arts, taught woodworking and furniture design at Iowa State. He also, many of you may have had a chance to meet him. He was one of our judges for the Northern Woods exposition, and did a great job and talked to a lot of you there. Chris has a raft of experience from going to Rhode Island College of Design to spending time in the Peace Corps, working really all around the world with, for instance, his craft, his design concept. His project will have some veneer work. It'll be a mixed materials project, small table. And he'll be focusing on the skills kind of from material selection through finishing that we'll do during this kind of demonstration-based seminar. The seminar runs Friday night, it'll be all day Saturday, and then 10 to 4 on Sunday. It'll be a great event. I'm going to get the dates up on the website the next week or two, and registration for that will open sometime this summer, probably
Yep, keep your eyes on the website for details. All right, does anybody have any announcements they need to make or any other contribution to the gathering?
I have a freebie, if somebody's interested in the shop vac. The only problem is I don't have room for it anymore. I bought a expensive one.
Dust extractor?
Dust extractor, and this is, it's about 30 years old, but I put new motors in it about 10 years ago, and since then it's been used very little. When I first got my new dust extractor, I was really disappointed in the thing because it didn't have enough suction. This thing really has good suction, and the only problem is you have to turn it upside down to empty it. It doesn't have a bag. So if anybody's interested, see me, I'll give it away for nothing. So
You have it with you tonight, Oz?
I don't have a.
All right.
I have a picture and I have the instruction book and the parts diagrams and everything.
Okay. There you go, a freebie. Anybody else? All right, so before we start our program, something we traditionally do is we give away door prizes. So when you all came in, you got a red ticket. Dan, you want to help with that? We'll start off with a 20-piece set of DeWalt drills, the black and gold ones. Oh yeah, look at that.
The last three digits are 445.
There you go. Donovan, you can always use extra drill bits. Nah. And we're gonna give away this package of crescent saw blades. 6.5, 7 1/4, 10, and a 12.
Last three numbers are 429.
429. Oh, there you, just the person who needs them.
Thank you.
You can donate them to the school. What else we got in here? We have a Hirschfield's gift certificate. Let's see what the denomination is. By the way, oh, this is a big one. I think we'll see that for something else. Here, we'll do these last two. So we got another set of drill bits, DeWalt's.
427.
Boy, everything, you guys are waiting this side of the room. Everybody over here. And then here for the last thing tonight, we're going to give away this walrus oil, 1 can of wood wax and 1 can of, or a bottle, small bottle of cutting board oil.
Got a Chad
Uh-oh. Is it hanging?
here. 443.
Oh, there you go. You need that, Mark. You can oil up your buddy. Oh, no, we should give away one of these then too. This will be a mid-sized detail too. This is a turning tool, carbide. See what shape it is. Yeah. Yep, it's an Allen wrench. It's a spear point turning tool, carbide.
440.
Ultra
I have
shear.
one already, so
You'll pass? All right.
Okay. 441. That's me. All right.
I'll wrap it up for you, Matt. You can take it home. Well, while I'm doing that, why don't you introduce the program or whomever's going to do that?
All right, so tonight we're doing a partial recap of the Northern Woods show. We've got 5 folks here that all won awards in the show, and it's a variety of different things. So I think it's going to be something for everybody. We're going to start with David Lane. He won Best in Show for his Robert Persig's toolbox that he made here. And
This is the inside of the toolbox.
take it away, David.
Good, okay.
So before I start this, I want to share a. Better? Sorry, yeah. Can you hear me now? Okay, all right. Anyway, so he died in 2017. His motorcycle was donated to the Smithsonian Museum, and a bunch of his ephemera, his tools, a bunch of other stuff were put out to auction. And so the box was on one of his auction sites. I saw that, I said, that's the box I wanted to make. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of the background. We're asking you back. That's this one. So this is the inspiration for it. Back in 1984, I worked at the Memphis and Shelby County Public Library, and a really good friend of mine, Karl Parsons, was pulling books off the shelf. This one was water damaged, and she's older than I. She was about 10 years on me. And at the time, she thought this would be a good book for me to read. So she pulled off the shelf and she gave it to me. And it sat on the shelf, traveled with me from Memphis to Kansas City to here. To the mid-90s when I started woodworking, and I think by coincidence I started reading it, and it really impacted the way I approach woodworking. The whole story did is talk about quality and that type of thing. But the two sentences that jumped out that I wrote down and kept were, sometimes it's a little better to travel than to arrive, and it's the sides of the mountain which sustain life, not the top. And what that meant to me was that the process at my bench when I'm working on something, that's really what counts. It's not the end result so much, but it's the process of being at the bench and losing yourself, forgetting that you've been doing it for 4 hours when it seems like 5 minutes, that whole process. And that's really stayed with me. And that's the one part, the parts of the book that are, I don't really think now are that Zen. He's just kind of a jerk, but but that part is kind of Zen. So that meant a lot to me. So that was the inspiration. I got some old tools from a guy in my neighborhood who fixes vintage motorcycles, and he loaned me a bunch of his old tools, and that's what I use as models for the tools. And he happened to have a 1968 Honda CB77 Superhawk in his garage. That's the same model and year of the bike that Pertzig rode across country with his 11-year-old son back in 1968. That's the box completed, basically the basic box completed. It has mitered spline joints along the side. The top is a 1/4-inch plywood panel that's veneered with walnut. That's most of, well, there's one thing that was super cool that I learned from Tony Kubalak, and the next slide will show you that. So this is the top of the box, and it's this part right here where the spot welding is supposedly coming over and attaching to the sides and the top, or the front, top, and back. And Tony, about 5 years ago, he had a beautiful piece he'd made about yay high, about waist high, one of his gorgeous reproductions. And the side of it had what looked like a floating panel and then a frame around it. And I was looking at it, and I noticed that the grain ran from the panel right up onto the frame. So it was all one piece of wood. And I was just gobsmacked by it. I was like, how on earth did you get this whole field down so flat and 1/16 of an inch below the frame? And he showed me this trick, which is that you, about an inch away from the frame, you dive down maybe a 1/16 of an inch gradually like that around the whole thing. And your eye plays a trick. It's a trompe l'oeil or trick of the eye. Your eye sees that and assumes the whole thing is below grade. But in fact, from here over, it's the same, it's on the same plane as the sides. It's a great trick, and it worked. It works so well. You look at it, you say, yeah, the whole thing is like that. It's coming over. I tried using veneer, and it just looked like crap. So that was a real tribute to how we help each other out, because Tony explained that to me, and I just thought it was a cool trick. This is the manual, the original, not his manual, but the same year manual is in the box. And this is from the page 52 of the manual. These are some of the tools that I use to imitate or to replicate. The crescent wrenches, the pliers, and the screwdriver were all from that. The rest of the tools are from page 46 of the book, where he lists the tools that he took with him. And I used those to take to this friend's house who gave me those, the vintage tools that matched those, and I worked with those. So here's making a sample of making some of the tools. This is the pliers. I went to Menards. I bought a cheap pair of pliers and a cheap crescent wrench, and I deconstructed them to see how they worked, which is kind of fun to do. And then I just did measured drawings of all
all of the tools. I have a thousandth of an inch caliper, so I made really accurate sketch drawings of the different parts of the tools, and then I just tried to imitate those. In this case, I used a model to figure out how, and then used a gouge and a router to get this shape down. And one cool thing about it, you can see here that just the stuff you learn, pliers are made of two of the exact same pieces, which was interesting to find out. So when I was like, wow, that's cool. So that was kind of a fun part of getting into these tools and seeing how they work. A lot of people asked about, oops. Yeah, there we go. A lot of people asked about the motorcycle chain. And so this is how that was done. This is I call it a maple sausage. That was a piece of maple with a round over bit on the router table. And I made just a stick that had this profile, which is the profile of the links of the chain. And then I cut it into all the same widths. And then I have a small, it's called a Unimat, a small drill press that converts to a, in the drill press thing, I had this form here to hold everything in the same place. And I just sort of mass produced a bunch of these pieces. This is on the Unimat that's turned back into a lathe, and that's making the little spacer pieces that go between. These are done for an 1/8 inch dowel. I have a 1 through 60 set of drill bits that go by thousands, so the holes were just a couple thousandths less than 1/8 of an inch, so everything pressed together nicely. And so that was just putting it together like that. And ironically, the first one I made, the glue kind of fouled it up. And in the process of fixing it, it got so bunged up that I just like, I'll just paint it, make it look crappy, which I did. And everybody likes this one more because it looks more like a motorcycle chain. Yeah, so the stuff that happens that you don't anticipate.
But it was designed that way.
Yes, of course, I did that on purpose. Yeah,
Right.
all right. And so here's the crescent wrench, which is fun to do. And again, there's the measured drawing and the deconstructed crescent wrench from Menards, 11% discount. And as you can see, it took 6 tries to get the threading and the teeth to line up. I had a tool for making wooden bolts, and it at least scribed the pitch for me. And then I had to use a needle file, and I just turned that lathe by hand and worked my way around and finally got something that managed to fit to make those. So a lot of trial and error. And the spark plugs, again, learning fun stuff. This was mostly lathe work. The wrench part, I just filed down to get it to an octagon. But the cool thing was this, and I had seen somewhere, I don't know if it was on a boat building video, I don't know why I would watch a boat building video, but there, or maybe on the Woodwright shop, on the old brackets that were used by using the branch of a tree, because the grain follows the branch and it's really, really strong. So I couldn't figure out how to bend this in that tiny bit. I couldn't like steam a toothpick. So I went up to the lilac bush and I found a couple pieces like this, and it worked exactly like on the large scale. I peeled off the bark and peeled off the cambium layer and just wound up with a perfectly bent piece. So that was a really fun kind of discovery to make. Making the tools was fun that way. Each one was its own little kind of model building experience. And that's just some of the tools, cotter pin, and obviously washers. This is it's baling, a roll of baling wire. And for that, I went down to the creek. I lived near Minnehaha Creek, and in the early spring, and got a skinny piece of willow and peeled the bark off the willow and soaked it, and then wrapped it around, and when it dried, it stayed where it was. So that was a fun way to make a fake. What? So yeah, the hammer was just made like a regular hammer, but just out of wood. And to get the sort of greasy stuff, I put some nitrile gloves on and smeared some black acrylic and just sort of held it. And so That hurt, by the way. And lastly, the feeler gauge was, that was just kind of lucky. This is veneer, and the thicker parts are, double pieces of veneer. I'm kind of amazed it didn't get all warpy, but I used Rust-Oleum spray paint on it that dried, I think Krylon, it dried really quickly. And so when I sprayed it and flipped and sprayed it, it kind of, I think it stabilized it really quickly and they stayed flat. I adjusted my car with these, and I took the bus today. So, and a hose clamp. So anyhow. And then the last two slides, I just want to talk about the finishing because people asked about that as well. The tools I use, these are model paints. I went to Hub Hobby. They have a rack of like 60 different colors of these. They're acrylic and they're water-based, obviously. And I use that as sort of a base coat on a number of them. And you can mix it really well. The tire irons, I wanted to have kind of a steel blue look. So I mixed some silver with the blue and got it to the right, patina, and then painted it. And then the sort of dirtying of the different tools, that you all are probably familiar with this. There's a guy who lives on the block he's a toy soldier fanatic that we were woodworkers, and he paints toy soldiers. And he told me all about doing dry brushing, which really works well. And you can take, a little bit of this paint, the black or brown, whatever color you want, put a little dab on, the piece of paper, and then dab a brush like this, a short kind of stipply brush, and then pop it down on the paper until it's just about out of paint, and then use that. And when you stipple that on the surface, enough of it comes off that it makes a shadow of that color, and you can make it as dirty as you want, or as clean as you want. So so that worked really well for doing that. And then I think the last slide is the milk paint. I'm into milk paint. Milk paint's fun. Has anybody used milk paint? Yeah, a bunch of folks have used milk paint. It's really cool stuff. This is a brand called Old Fashioned Milk Paint. There's other brands. So it's just the one I happen to learn about. And it's great stuff. It's powder. It's non-toxic. It's water soluble, and it dries fast. So it's really nice that way. You can mix it to whatever consistency you want. And I found this was a really useful brush on something this size. He had a lot of control. And so what I did was I mixed some of this rust red color and put 2 coats of that on first. It dries quickly, which is really nice. And it dries pretty thick. I mixed it fairly thick, so I got a fairly thick coat on. And let that dry for, I think, a couple hours. It dries pretty fast. And once that was dry, I mixed up this blue color and painted that over it. I put 2 coats of that over it. And then again, it sands. When it's dry, it sands really nicely. It's not sticky at all. It's powdery. And so it sands beautifully for that. So I was able to sand down through the blue just to where I hit the bottom coat of red, and it came out and looked like rust. So that worked out nicely. And then to get the patina on it, that was I just rubbed it with some wipe-on polyurethane, and it soaked right into that powdery finish of the paint, a really nice kind of patina, and then waxed it, and it made it look kind of metallic. So that worked out nicely. And I think the last thing, I have to give credit to my brother and his wife. When I do these things, I like to learn about what I'm doing. So I was reading a bunch about Pertzig and his trip, and gathered together bits of information. I was able to find over the course of working on over a year of photographs from the actual trip that Pertzig took, or the Sullivans, who they traveled with for half the time, took. And I was also, people recreate the journey. People that are really into it, that have motorcycles, recreate the journey. And one guy and his daughter did it, and they kept really good records of everything, where they ate, everything out of the book. And so I was able to find out the days and where they stayed every day, and plot a map that shows exactly where they went. And then on the back, there's a review from 1974 that compares it to Moby Dick. I'm sorry, it's not Moby Dick. And a rebuttal by the novelist Edward Abbey, who's a wonderful writer, who rebuts that. So that was a fun 2 reviews to find. And then lastly, a bit of tragedy. In 1979, Chris, his son, who we went on the trip with, was walking home in San Francisco from the Zen Center and was mugged and stabbed and murdered. So he died in 1979, which is pretty sad. So I wanted to have some mention of him because he's part of the story. So that's his obituary from the New York Times. And so it's fun. And my brother knew how to do this. I got all the info and laid it out like a third grade science project and sent it to him, and they did a nice job and had it produced as a and that's it. So thank you.
All right, next we're going to have Mike Johnson. Probably all of you know Mike. He's the past program director. Now he's running the Northern Woods Expo. He won the award for best traditional piece for his Art Nouveau table that he's going to tell us about.
All right, well, thanks everyone. Matt said my name is Mike Johnson. Made an Art Nouveau side table or pedestal table. The inspiration from it was last fall. I was mule deer hunting out in Wyoming and shot a 4x4 mule deer, and I wanted something to display it on. And that's why I chose Art Nouveau, because they're very into nature. So sorry, I'm on European time, so a little jet lagged here. So everything starts with an idea, right? So came up with the pedestal table. This was the original design that I based my idea off of. It's by Louis Majorel. He was one of the major Art Nouveau designers from the late 1800s, early 1900s. And so to go through the process, I started out by designing from the top down. So here's the top view. And by this, I was able to determine the center point, which was very crucial for where this point was. So that three-way miter was probably the trickiest part of the build. So with that, I just did some sketches. So here's a full-blown drawing sketch. This is one of the earlier designs. So as you can see, the leg is a little further from the center point. I'm part of one of the design SIGs, and going through one of our meetings, I brought in one of my mock-ups. This is my final mock-up. Yep. This is my final mock-up, but I had a similar mock-up and I brought it in. And if you look at this leg design, it's a lot chunkier. The stretcher is a lot flatter. So those are some of the points that they brought up that I should work on. So I redesigned, made it a little bit narrower, arched the stretcher up a little bit higher. But by doing a drawing, a full-scale drawing, I was able to use the paper for my my templates. So I cut these out with a razor blade, sprayed them onto some MDF, and then I ended up with a template like this. So this is a template for the leg. So going through the process on how am I going to construct it, I decided to go with mortise and tenon with these angled pieces. Without that mortise, when you glue it up, the pieces are going to want to slide. So mortise and tenon here, as well as at the bottom of the stretcher. So the tricky part is, how do you get these to be perfectly flat, perfectly square? So I worked up some different templates, some pairing blocks. So my first step was to use a pairing block to get this part flat. Then I came up with another pairing block that fit over this. And I had a jig to show me the right angle. Then I was able to use a chisel to pare down and get that part to fit really nice and snug. So there you can see the bracket that I used. So before everything was pared away, you know, there's a little bit of waste in that corner that had to get taken out. So I had to use a little bit of a spacer up here to hold that bracket on to get this angle at the right spot. So that's how I accomplished that. Most everything on here I did with hand tools, except for a few key cuts. This cut here, this cut here, this cut here, and this cut here. Those were, I made jigs on the, for my table saw to make sure that those were as accurate as possible. And then the next problem I had was, how am I going to do the tenon? So what I ended up doing is using some MDF as a spacer to lift my router plane up off of my bench. I was able to scribe a line and then just slowly work my way down with my router plane, because I couldn't figure out a way to make sure that both shoulders were coplanar, and by doing it this way, it worked out pretty much perfect. So it was a challenge, but worked out pretty good. And this was just kind of a test piece. I ended up making a better jig for it to sit on. So here's showing the layout of my miter. So as I said before, one of my first designs, the original idea was going to be to drop in a circle disc. I was going to just notch that out, drop it in, screw it on, to have something to attach on. But that makes it tricky to find out where the center point is. So throughout one of the other things that in the SIG that we talked about was my foot was out a little bit further than the top. So they're saying I should make the top bigger. Well, I didn't want to make the top bigger. I wanted to keep that about the size it was at, is about 16 inches across the triangle part. So what I ended up doing was I moved the leg into the center, which also meets at a miter, which then gives me my center point for where my stretcher would meet. So basically what I did is I just laid it down, took my piece after I had the joinery done for the stretcher, and then I used the straight edge and got my mark for here. Then I used a 30-degree paring block. So for this miter here, I marked it, sawed close a line, pared down with the chisel, did the same thing for the stretcher in this corner. Well, that got me really close, but not perfect. So here's one of my dry fits. Looks pretty good, but if you get really in there, there is still some gaps. So here's something I came up with. I found a trick that people making rocking chairs use to fit the chair to the rocker. Take some sandpaper, hold the pieces together, and the key is to draw from the paper side back. By doing that, you're not going to round over any of your corners. Otherwise, if you pull the other way, you're going to risk rounding things over. So that got things really tight, really good, until it blew up, of course. So here you can see I had a piece of MDF on my bench to protect it, and I also put in some blocks to help keep everything in line and in the same spot. Everything's labeled, so each piece goes to a specific spot, because of course nothing's perfect. So after all the joinery was done, I had to do that first. Then I tapered the legs. So everything's done with the hand plane. So if you look closely, you can see that this one's a little bit narrower than this. So I just shim this up to the right amount, just use the scribe the line, then just plane down to the line. So here I am playing around. So that's pretty much all the shavings after all the tapering. With the shape of it, I don't know if I could have, I suppose I could have made a jig on the table saw, but it would have been a little tough. I just enjoy using hand planes. It's a lot more enjoyable to use. And like David said, it's the process, not the end result, right? So this leads us to the shaping. A lot of it's hand shaped or hand carved. I'd never done any carving before. So a lot of practice. I got probably 6 or 7 legs with all kinds of different styles. They're all pretty hacked up and pretty ugly looking, but that's how you learn. But just going through the process, I'm just like, I'm never gonna get this thing to be as pristine as I would want it to be. So just by chance, I was searching on YouTube and I came up and found out about scratch stock. So I don't know if you guys have ever used any of that or before, or heard of it or used it before, but it's a really slick, just a quick, cheap and dirty tool that you make out of a piece of scrap. I don't know, someone had mentioned using Sawzall blades for a blade. Not the best because these are hardened, so they're really hard to sharpen. So, but it's still, I sharpened it on my grinder, worked pretty slick. So this was used to shape the stretchers, the back of the bracket and the back of the leg. I used a different tool or a different cutter to do this center flute. These outer edges were done with a number 7 sweep gouge. And then I came back with this because that just wasn't deep enough. It looked a little flat. So I just used this tool to deepen that a little bit further. So look it up. It's really, really great tool to use. Easy to make. And this just shows a picture of working on some of the details. So after I had the joinery done for the upper bracket, just playing around with some ideas. I wanted it to look like this was a branch that was being peeled away from the trunk. So that kind of mimics that. It's not a true mirror image of this profile of this, but that's kind of what I was going after. And then here's the glue up. So this was a really tricky part. It's like, how do you glue up this miter? Came up with, I posted on our IO groups, got some good responses back, and Jason Holtz came up with a great idea of using CA glue, tape, and a caul. Mistake I made was I just just stuck the tape on the top. I should have wrapped it around. As you can see here, I got a clamp holding this caul. I clamped things up and everything was good. I want one more clamp to make it perfect and popped off. So it was a fire drill, typical glue up. And then this shows the top too, where I just used a big hose clamp and some cauls to clamp that. So. It did move a little bit, so luckily I had a lot of meat left, so I just flushed things up, and the end result was pretty happy with it. So here you can see I played around with a lot of ideas on how I was gonna attach the top, and then what was I gonna do with these brackets. So I left the brackets long to give me some extra meat in case I wanted to. I played around with the idea of having it coming around and wrap around, which I wanted to do, but ran out of time. I was really under the gun at the end to get this thing done. So basically I just figured out, I figured out what this height was. I tried using a straight edge going across from the top, but it's not 100% perfect. So I just used my straight edge rule, got the height here, and then just found out these points by using my straight edge rule. Made a mark, cut it on my table saw with the jig that I had made previously. And this just shows doing the final carving of this upper bracket. Use the wooden clamp to keep things from moving too much. One of the things I really struggled with was the foot, and what shape should it be? How should I terminate this edge? And it was, I kept wanting to stop this profile short, but I just couldn't figure out how to do it. And in my mind, wrapping it around just wasn't looking right. But as soon as I did it on a test piece, it was like, yeah, that's the way it should be. So then for the top, that was another thing that I did a lot of thought on. The original plan was I was gonna veneer something just because of wood movement. And if I attach the brackets, how do you account for the wood movement? So I was gonna take a class from Tom Shrunk, and we just couldn't get our schedules to line up. And so decided to just find a really cool piece of lumber, found some curly ambrosia maple online, got some 8/4 so I could resaw it and book match it. And so that's what it looked like after resawing. After I flattened things out, you lost a lot of the symmetry, but that's just the nuance of using the ambrosia maple. So yeah, so that's pretty much it. And there's my meal there. So that's pretty much the whole inspiration for making this piece. So there we go. That's what I got. Yeah.
Mike, what is the joinery at the tops of the legs? Or is there any?
We're at here.
Yeah.
This just floats.
Okay.
Yep, just floats. I played around, thought of how should I do it, right? You and I talked about it. You suggested dovetails. I played on with that idea. And in the end, it's just, I'm just decided just to go flush. Then I don't have to worry about the wood movement. I got screws right here. And yeah.
You know, outer 3 legs are just touching, they're not.
Yep.
Really?
Yep.
All right.
Yep. Any other questions? All right. Thank you.
Next up, we got Stu Fox, who's going to talk about his butterfly table. I know he had a couple of entries, but he won the Judges Award for his butterfly table. And so as soon as he gets set up, he'll talk about that table. While Stu's getting set up, I did want to mention that next month's meeting is going to be here again at the New Brighton Community Center. We're going to have Steve McClune's going to be talking about inlay. And then July is our annual guild picnic at the Roseville Park. Hopefully you all can make that. You can come out, drink some beer, have some food, fraternize with a bunch of good folks, have fun. We'll have door prizes too there, you know, might win some.
See if I can get this to work right. Am I on?
Yeah.
Once I clip it on. All right. See if we can make this work. Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me. It's kind of humbling to work with some of the people that are in this group, and I mean that sincerely, because I've been attending these meetings for a long time and seeing the quality of work that people put together. So this is my my cherry butterfly table, and just a little bit about me. I'm a hobbyist woodworker. I retired in 2015. My degree's in forestry. I was a seasonal firefighter for 3 seasons out in northern Idaho, traveled all over the western US, fought about 36 wildfires during my summer. Out of college, I couldn't find a job. I wanted to be a big range or a big woods forester out in Idaho or Montana. Ended up doing landscape construction because there's a federal hiring freeze. And my tools were a chainsaw, a circ saw, hammers, those kinds of things. I built decks, retaining walls, fences, those types of things. So those were my high quality tools. And then I was after I did that, I became the city forester, manager of parks and natural resources for the city of Eden Prairie for 38 years. So I'm a learner. One of the things I found working for the city is they put us through all kinds of educational courses to find out who we were, how we related to people. I don't know anyone else, if anyone else has done this, but you do the Myers-Briggs, you find out what type of person you are, you do the DISC system, you do on and on and on. And part of that is because as a manager, you need to be able to relate to people in a way that makes them feel worth working. And so I found out that my number one strength was I was a learner. I always knew that I liked to learn. And so what my journey's been is in 2014, I took a class from Tom Casper, the Unplugged Workshop. And I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do when I retired. Could have gone into consulting, had all kinds of ideas on what people would pay me for doing forestry consulting or natural resource consulting. I said, I don't want to do that. I've been doing it for too long. I've been to too many public meetings. I've been to too much politics. I've been to too many angry neighborhood meetings where they what do you mean you're here to tell me what you want me to do? I got tired of that. So I've been taking classes. I first took Tom Casper, then he suggested going out to the Center for Furniture Craftsmanship in Maine. Took Peter Korn's 2-week class, and that just kind of set me off on my journey. And I've taken numerous classes from masters, and I've gone to the seminars and I've learned things, and I just keep building my base of woodworking skills. And so one of the courses I took was from Phil Morley. I built a wall cabinet, and I don't know how many know Philip Morley, but he does some amazing things. And he's no longer in Texas. I think he's now in Maine, but this is the inspiration for that table. And when I took the class from him at Mark Adams, he was talking about shop saw and veneer. He was talking about using lumber core, all these types of things. So I thought, I should try that. So that's what I did. I kind of took, it's kind of based on this. It's all kind of hand sketched out. I used my junior high woodworking or my junior high classes in mechanical arts to draw this thing out. And so I started out with shop saw and veneer. And so the shop saw and veneer is 3/30 seconds. And what I found is when you make shop saw and veneer, and I don't know if anyone else will do this, but if you mark it and then you run it through your drum sander, it should stack up pretty good. But I found out that if I put the arrow on there, sometimes they lost it. So I found out if I put my name on there, I can spell my name pretty simple. So it was a little easier. If you got a short name, you can do those types of things. And so this is the yellow popple for the lumber core. And so when you do lumber core, you basically cut your popple into just strips on a bandsaw. You just fire them through, then you just lay them loose, and then you cross band it with veneer. And so it's cross banded with 1/8 inch veneer. And the only thing you basically do is you put glue on the surface. You don't glue the staves together. They just sit loose. And then run it through a vacuum press and you end up with lumber core. So this is cross banded going this direction. The staves go this way. And then I actually started putting in the ends for the table, the solid pieces of cherry. And then I basically put these pieces of cherry that were down here, put those together and pressed them on with a vacuum press. Carcass basically is basically mortise and tenon, but it's got a 2-degree splay. So if you notice, everything kind of tips outward. And they're hunched tenons. It was a real challenge because part of it was, did I want to, typically when you build a piece of furniture, you do a little reveal. You do a little offset to give it a little bit of interest. And Philip Morley says, you don't always have to do that. Sometimes you can break the rules. So you'll notice that everything on that is flush on the outside. There is no recess. And then basically once the legs were dry fit in the carcass, then I took and bandsawed using a template similar to what Mike did, bandsawed the 2 insides on curves. And it's interesting when you bandsaw something like that, for some reason, even though the grain is running true, it seemed to bend even a little bit more. It seemed to take its own direction. And once I bandsawed it, then I took a spoke shave and cleaned it all up and tried to true it up. The aprons on there are curved, which represented a problem when I got to the next part, and that is this little thing here. If you look at that box, it's a drawer box, but because the front apron is curved, to get the reveal equal right here, you end up with a trapezoid shape on your front. It's not a rectangle. And so it actually took me probably longer to make that drawer box than it did to make the carcass frame. And so the box is basically using the same shop sawn veneer, top, bottom, the walnut, and the cherry. The sides are solid, and then there's a router, basically dado, or a rabbit on there, and a dado down here, and just try to put it all together. And then I used black ebony and black palm to finish it off. So had to take each piece of ebony and fit it in there, and then miter the corners to make the edges meet together. So the drawer glides that hold that drawer are basically just simple. They're just set into the front and back. And again, this kind of shows you the reveal that's equal across there, and it's equal here, but because it's angled, it's very, very subtle. The challenge of finishing that table. Took a class from Kevin Southwick, or took a couple classes from him on finishing. And he always talked about doing a storyboard. Charlie, you talked about doing storyboards too. When you finish something, take your pieces of wood, get them all set up, sand them to the same, then start doing your finishing. Well, what I found out, and I should have thought about this, but when you do a piece of book match, especially a piece that's this big, the chatoyance on that top from one direction to the other is very, very pronounced. So when I finished it, I thought, well, I don't have anything I can work on. Well, yes, I do. I have the bottom. So my storyboard is on the bottom of that top. And the first time I thought I was going to finish with an oil finish, and I put an oil finish on it, and I couldn't stand it. It was too bold. And so I went over to Kevin and I showed it to Kevin at Woodcraft, and he says, "Well, that's an interesting problem you got there." He says, "What are you trying to do?" And I said, "Well, I'm trying to tone it down. I don't want it to be so brash." And so he said, "Well, why don't you can sand it off, can't you?" And I said, "Well, yeah, it's 330 seconds." So I sanded the whole thing off again, and then I started experimenting with different applications of shellac. And I basically used blonde shellac. And I found out that about a 3-pound cut of shellac, just one coat of 3 pound, seemed to finish it. And it stayed pretty good. And then I basically sprayed it with lacquer. And so that was how the table is finished. And it's flat, and that's what I wanted to do. I didn't want I didn't want a gloss. I didn't want a semi-gloss. I wanted it as flat as I possibly could. So I just want to thank the Guild again for the opportunity to win an award. So I don't know if anyone has any questions about that table, but that's my story.
Next, we're going to have Karl Heel, who he won 2 awards at the show. He won the Glenn Gordon Award and the Judges Award for his, it's underneath there. He'll get it up there pretty soon. His bench that looks like that was inspired by a bridge.
Can you hear me? You hear me? All right. I'm Karl Heel. Wanted to first thank the Northern Woods Committee for putting on the show. Mike, and I know you had quite a team with you. And thank all the Guild leaders for making this what it is, a great resource for people like me. As you mentioned, I won the Glenn Gordon Award. I don't see Tom Casper here, but thanks, Tom. And the Judges Award #3. So this bench was designed to replace the bench that came with our cabin. The interesting thing I found about buying a cabin is they come as is typically. Whether you want it or not, it's fully furnished and has a garage full of junk. So that was the bench that was under the window there. And it really lends itself to be a bench. Can't see out the window right now, but that's our view of the lake from the living room. So you really don't want a chair there or a bench with a back. So that was the task my wife gave me, was to design a bench to replace that. So I, for some reason, got in my mind I wanted to do a storage bench. And I made several sketches and designed several things somewhat, and just none of them inspired me to take them any further. They tended to look like cabinets and were just generally uninteresting. The long, narrow shape was a struggle for me. What am I going to do with this shape to make it interesting? And then I finally thought of a bridge. A bridge can be a pleasing design in a long, narrow shape. So I kind of was inspired mostly from the Smith Avenue Bridge in St. Paul, also known as the High Bridge. So this is my first SketchUp model. I like to design on SketchUp, gives me a lot of freedom to try different things without getting too far into it. I'm a member of Roger Knutson's design special interest group, and one of the processes that he advocates is building a model for a project. Something I haven't really done a lot of in the past, but I decided that I should take Roger's advice and build a model for this one. The model told me a lot immediately. I kind of liked this shape before I built the model, and afterwards it was obvious that the arcs were way too light. They needed to be a lot heavier, and I replaced those immediately. And this is kind of my first model with that I wasn't able to bring tonight because it hasn't survived up to this point. But and so this is after I replaced the arcs with heavier ones. So now it was time to take the model to the design group. Discussion of the model was very productive. We determined that the visual as well as the structural would be improved if I changed the arcs to where they went all the way down to the footings of the bridge. You made a lot steeper arc than is actually on the Smith Avenue Bridge, but I think visually works better for my project. Had a lot of discussion about the my footings, and I've had a lot of comments since then too. People either like them or they don't like them. I like them, so I stayed with this design. Yeah, and then really had a lot of discussion about these spaces here. If you saw on my previous slide, I was trying to play around with some wooden structures and crosses and such, and was really struggling. I didn't like what I had, and nobody else liked what I had. And then Mark Lobb suggested, well, why not forget about wood there and put some steel rods? And I'm like, yeah, why did I not think of that? So I immediately ran with that idea, sourced some black steel rods and changed my design, and came up. This was my my final SketchUp model that I started working with. This is the remains of the main fixture that I use for most of the fabrication of the critical parts of this bridge, if you will. It's kind of hard to get a good picture of it, but initially it was quite a bit longer on the downside here so that I could bend down and into a straight where I could trim them off. And then the big holes are just where the C-clamps were put in the clamping process. So I had, I think, 9 C-clamps around that to clamp there's 7 laminations here that are glued up and clamped into this arc. After the 4 arcs were made, well, and the shorter ones, then I had to figure out how to square this up. So what I ended up doing was putting another sheet of MDF under this that I had squared up with the bottom edge of the arc, and use that on the table saw as a fence. And then on the left-hand side here, you can see that that's been cut shorter. That's the actual cut that goes through the arcs. And I did it all on the table saw, then just flipped each arc over and cut the other side. And there's also, these arcs there was a little bit of spring back. So to compensate for that, on the ones that were sprung out slightly, I would put a spacer so that the actual distance was the same on all of them. If you measured the thickness of all of these, there's some slight variation through there. After that, turned it around and cut the bottom of the fixture off, and use that as a cutting guide again on the table saw to square off the bottoms of all of the arcs, and finally flipped it over and cut off the tops to get a flat mounting surface that I could join up there. This right here is just a cut that I used on for the shorter arcs. I put a fixture on the other end, cut each one to square these up so that they would line up properly also. When I was doing all that, obviously I used the toggle clamps. Clamps right now are shown working on the shorter arcs rather than the bigger arcs. They'd be out at the other end. Let's see. The final use of this fixture was for drilling the holes to come into these arcs. And on that, I have a horizontal mortising machine, kind of a horizontal router that's on a slide. And so I mounted this fixture on the bed of that and then lined up for each of the holes, and was able to put just a 1/4-inch end mill bit come into that and then cut in without a lot of tear out. So And then, of course, you have the final bench in front of you. I used white oak for everything except for the footings, which are maple. The main, most of the bridge components, I fumed with ammonia to get the color to them. The top part, I ebonized with a vinegar, with steel wool dissolved in vinegar. And then did some research and found out steel wool dissolved on vinegar will gray maple. So I was shooting for a real gray looking, almost concrete look for the footings. And it looked absolutely great when I did it. Unfortunately, I had on one of my test pieces, then I put some varnish on it and it turned very yellow. So I played around with a bunch of other test pieces and was able to retain much of the gray, but still not as much as I would have liked to, by spraying lacquer before I put varnish on. Kind of fixed it a little bit, but still not as gray and as nice looking as it was bare wood. Yeah, then the finish on this is just rub on Minwax poly. I did 3 coats of clear and then a top coat of the satin. Made just a frame for the cushion here, and then stapled webbing across it to give it some support, some softness. Ordered some foam online and some batting to fill it up. Then I went to what was the name of this place? The J.R. Harris Fabric Outlet, and spent at least 2 hours.
You got halfway down the first aisle.
Yeah, it's well, I was able to stay in the blacks area, you know, and I finally settled on this fabric with a lot of prodding from my wife to get done. I was actually a little bit unsure of the choice, but I received a lot of really good feedback from pretty much everybody. So I think I probably made a good choice here. This is an interesting feature here, and you guys are all looking at it eye level, so you see what's happening here. When I went to the store to get some felt pads to put on this, to basically just put it so I could put it on the floor without scratching it. The pads, as you guys can see underneath there, are really light. Not even thinking, I cut the pads, put them out to the end, put them on all of them, flipped it back over, put it on the ground, and said, oh my God, those white edges out there just look like hell. So my first attempt at fixing it was to flip it back over and cut them back quite a ways where you don't see them looking down this way, which ended up giving it a levitating look on the footings. And this one is another one where people like it or don't like it. One of the judges commented that he liked the levitation that it created, and another judge suggested that I remove those and put it back down to the ground. So I have to have pads under it, so they're staying, and I kind of like the levitation. I guess one of my takeaways of this whole project is it is really great to get out and get people's feedback through the process, after the process. Even if you don't agree with it, the feedback is really good. It's a fun project, and I guess that's pretty much everything I had prepared. Any questions I can answer? Yes, Ross.
You finished the rods.
I actually bought them in black. So they were, and it wasn't really an anodizing because you could see that there is really actually a paint. So they were made for like deck railings for the horizontals and such. I sourced them from.
Drilling the holes in the arcs for those rods?
You know, with the end mill bit and the router, they went in really nice.
So you used a router for all of those?
Yes, yeah, I've got a router, horizontal router fixture that I bought a couple of years ago from a guy out in Oregon that sells them. It's on slides, so it'll slide in. I was worried about this depth getting in there, but I was able to do that with the 1/8 inch end mill bit that I had. And the end mill bit, that'll, pretty low speed on the router, cut through pretty cleanly. I did some tests on that too, trying to figure out if I was going to have to try to temporarily clamp bands on here to prevent the tear out, but it cut really clean. So.
Do you have a slide that you used to keep those router holes parallel with it?
Yeah, this tool, the guy who makes it, I bought one years ago, a used one. It's called a Stanfield mortiser. And it's got stops so you can slide the router left and right, and then a forward slides also, and then stops that you can set. So in this case, I just set the stops to freeze it the left and right and just use it to plunge. Else? All right, turn it over to Aaron.
While they're figuring out the technicalities, I'm here to introduce Aaron Fitch. Aaron won first prize for the best, first prize for the first time in show entry.
Yeah.
Aaron is pretty much originally from Minnesota, grew up here and went to the university. Went to the university. Went to the University of Minnesota, studied environmental science and sustainability. He garnered his interest in that from his grandfather, who took him for walks in the forest and pointed out different types of trees and their growth cycles and everything about wood. And of course, that obviously stuck with him because he got a degree in sustainability.
Yeah.
He works in construction, as many of his grandfathers did, creating chairs and other construction items. If you don't recall, he had a chair he had a table that matches the chairs, and he came across a whole pile of red oak, decided he doesn't like red oak, and decided he needed to do something with it. So here he is to tell you about that.
Yeah, but for the record, I've always disliked red oak. It wasn't a recent thing, but no, yeah. So I didn't know about this whole community. I didn't know about the exhibition until I had already finished the table and set up chairs. So my inspiration for making I wish I should have a photo of the table, but the table is very similar for those who haven't seen it. It's similar. It's a coffee table. It's about 2 feet by 4 feet, about 20 inches tall. Yeah, this winter, things slow down a little bit, so I decided I would build myself a coffee table. And I have a lot of wood floating around the shop that I haven't used because I don't like it, and that wood was red oak. I had recently heard about some ebonizing techniques, and I figured I'd give it a shot on the red oak. And kind of that combination of work being slow for the winter and having too much red oak floating around was essentially the catalyst for my project. I started the process by experimenting with vinegar ebonizing technique, which is you just take this is actually food grade vinegar, but ideally you use cleaning grade vinegar. It's a 6% acidity, so you dissolve steel wool in the vinegar. Some sort of chemical reaction occurs that I learned about and forgot about. And you apply that solution to any wood, and it activates the tannins within that wood. Most wood has at least a little bit. some wood has a lot of like a really high tannin content, and oaks are one of the species that generally has a lot of tannin. But what's really cool about the process is that instead of taking a dye and putting it on the wood and having that dye absorb, you know, in a way that's you know, dictated by your application, when you apply the vinegar, you allow the wood to respond based on where those tannins are throughout that piece of wood. And so you end up with what I found was a much more interesting pattern. It was a pattern that allowed for the grain structure of the wood to reveal itself rather than just putting a black dye right on top of the wood and having it all turn evenly black. And actually, similar to your maple footings, this is a piece of maple I experimented on, and so you can see that there's it's bird's eye and a little bit curly. So you can see at certain points throughout the wood, the tannin content was higher, and so near where the bird's eye patterning was, and so I think this kind of exaggerates what happens with the oak, because the oak is so heavy with the tannin levels that the whole thing just turns black. But when you look really closely, you can see, I don't know, the subtlety really shows up. And so I experimented with that process for quite a while, and it was a whole lot of fun, honestly. Yeah, I think experimented. Gosh, I messed with one application, 2, 3, 4 applications, and every single with every application, I made new discoveries. It would probably take a long time to talk about every single what I noticed about every single step. But what I will say is that if you do decide to give it a shot, you can go once. You know, you do a single coat of vinegar, and you can end up with a much lighter. You won't get comprehensive ebonizing. So if you really like the pattern or the texture in the wood, just a single coat works really well, and you maintain that. If you've got like a really curly, nice piece or nice quarter sawn or something, then you won't disrupt that too much. Let's see. And yeah, another aspect of the process that I thought was really cool is that as you're applying this vinegar, I mean, I would just pour it out and try to spread it around quick, so it would soak in evenly, and then come over it and lightly sand it. And so throughout the whole process, you're popping the grain. And so I found that sort of accidentally, the set of chairs and table ended up being some of the nicest finishing work I've ever done, because I was so thorough about popping the grain and then cutting it back every single time. Yeah, so that worked quite well. Trying to think about what else. Yeah.
You mentioned at the show, which this was new to me, that when you dissolve the steel wool in the vinegar, that you submerged it so it was not in contact with air.
Yeah.
And that is not something I never heard doing. Can you say something about that?
Yeah. So if the steel wool is exposed to air, it oxidizes, and so instead of getting like a black a finish, you'll end up with a lot of rust in your vinegar. And so I used a little stick of white oak I had floating around, just a little cut off chunk, and I used that to hold the steel wool down. And what was cool about that is that stick turned completely black, and I think some of the tannins soaked into the vinegar. And I think it's in here actually. It might be right there. It smells really good. Okay, it's not in this one. Dang. But yeah, so that was really cool because it keeps your vinegar from rusting too much, and then also if you use white oak, you start that the dye process. It seemed like it jump started it because I made 4 of these chairs. 2 of them are a bit lighter, and the last 2 are substantially darker. And I think I finished the last 2 after I had put that white oak stick into the vinegar to hold the steel wool down.
Does it completely dissolve, or do you have to strain it?
Yeah, so I'm gonna have to strain this now. It was fine for a while because it was just sitting in the shop on the shelf, so all the sediment settled to the bottom, and I could pour it into a cup. Also, you can dilute this like 10-to-1 water to vinegar. So every time I pour it into a cup, I'll just do a little bit, and then I add 4 parts water, 1 part vinegar, and then I just pour the whole thing right back in, and it makes wood. It dyes wood just as well as when I first started.
How many coats did you sell?
So the whole thing was an experiment for me. So I started on the table. The finish on the table was really, really smooth. That was like 320 maybe. I think these I stopped at like 220, just because the table took, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, 6 days maybe, and each chair took probably as long. Chairs take a really long time.
Because you're worried about sanding through down to the wood?
No, I got lazy. Oh yeah, so it goes in. It penetrates really well. I think especially if you start at like an 80 grit. Pour the vinegar on. It's really porous, and it just like soaks it up, and so you get a pretty deep dye penetration. And actually, one day I was able to I refinished the tabletop 3 times in a single day because the vinegar dries fast. The finish that I used was Rubio monocoat, and so that's kind of good to go after half an hour. So I tried it once after maybe just 2 coats of ebonizing with the vinegar. I didn't like, I wanted it to be darker. So I sanded it all off. I sanded the Rubio monocoat off, which is a hard wax oil. And then it was kind of splotchy though. So I had to sand the whole thing back. Reapplied, and I worked my way up to like a 320. Repeated that because I made some mistakes. Oh yeah. I think this one might have some hard wax oil on it, and I don't remember. I think that one does too. Yeah, the chairs, the whole design process was kind of was secondary to I was a lot more focused on the finish, and so I didn't really have much of a method for chair design or the table that you cannot see right now. After working on the table a lot, I got tired at the end of a day, and I sat down on a plywood moving rack, and these are the proportions and dimensions of a plywood moving rack, like the rolling cart. It's like tilted a little bit on the base, and then it's like an A-frame. I sat down on that, and it was really comfortable. And so I took all the measurements and I copied it, and that's what this is. It's about 8 inches here, about 9.5 here, and it's a 5-degree pitch plus another 5 on the back, 5 for the seat, and then 5 more degrees for the back. And they're really, really comfortable. Yeah, I wanted to experiment with bending wood a little bit. So these are each 3 plies of red oak. I just made a little form and bent them up. I just got them wet and hoped they wouldn't crack. I'd like to experiment more with that, but I didn't. I was just sort of winging it. Yeah. Trying to think what else. Yeah, so on the chairs, probably 3, because I just jumped. I did like 80 80 grit, applied the vinegar, 120, applied the vinegar, 220, applied the vinegar, and then, okay, so probably 4 on the table, 3 on the chairs, I think. But it happens so fast. It's like, yeah. And if you wanted to speed it up even more, you can get an air hose and dry the wood off. Yeah. Yeah, I think, I don't know if there's any other questions. I'm sure I'm forgetting things. I didn't prepare as much as you guys. I didn't know what to expect. But also, yeah, I just want to say I'm really grateful for this whole community and the opportunity to make something and show it. All the feedback was worth, it was really cool to win something, but that just getting feedback and input from people who have so much more experience is like, really blew me away. I'm really grateful for that. And I think I get positive affirmation from friends and family, but they aren't woodworkers. So it only goes so far, but then to get feedback from folks who've been doing this for a long time is really cool. I'm grateful for that. Yeah.
Yeah, so you guys that are reluctant to enter the show, listen to the board on what you did. That hits the nail on the head. So thanks, Aaron.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, everybody. That's it. Hopefully you'll enter the Northern Woods exhibition next year. And then we'll have you up here for this meeting. Thanks.